what I'm always wondering about when I meet someone who does like a crazy job that, that I have no understanding of, or that seems like something morbid, is, how do you separate that? Like, did it take years before you could walk into a case and know that, like, hey, this is my job. My job is to tell the story of what happened to this body I'm going to look at, and that's it, versus like, oh my God, this is a fallen human being.
Right. It's a difficult thing. I think that anybody that says that they can purely do that is lying. To be blunt, you can't, because, there's this thing, I think that it's probably, Julian, it's even primal. I think that when you're put in a position where, even if you're seeing the dead on a daily basis, which I did as a medical legal death investigator, you still, your humanity is reflected in them. And I know that sounds, kind of new agey, but no, when you're physically there in the room, you're in that space in which they indwelled. If you're in a home, that's I'm making a big assumption there, because obviously all cases that I worked were not in homes. But when you occupy that personal space that someone indwelled in, one of the things I always tell my students, and I've said it in media, is that for medical legal death investigators and forensic scientists to a lesser degree, you're always having to try to understand the abnormal in the context of the normal. It's like if you're in your mom's kitchen, all right, you associate that with beautiful things, hopefully, good smells, happy memories, maybe making Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner. Yeah. You never know, all those celebratory times. But can you imagine walking in and somebody's got a butcher knife buried in their neck in that same space in which celebrations have taken place? And that's what you're kind of faced with, I think, in our world. And it's hard. Like, even when you're talking to hardened police officers, they have a difficult time kind of understanding the world that I formerly inhabited, because we deal with all manner of deaths. It's not simply homicides. Right. It's suicides. It's accidental deaths. People, unless it's Robin Williams, you don't hear about suicides, do you? You look in the obituaries and papers and it'll say died suddenly. Right. And that kind of that's kind of a snapshot of what our world is like. In a lot of places, suicides outnumber homicides 2 or 3 to 1. And for me, they're more difficult. They're more difficult to work with, because you're not typically going to have a witness, but yet you still have a violent death. I found myself in incredible places that other people would not have had an opportunity to go as a result of a death, and as a result of my occupation as a death investigator, where I've gone into the very bottom of a super tanker, for instance, moored on the side of the Mississippi River because a drunk deckhand was coming back from a bar and they left one of the hatches open. He stepped in it and fell, I don't know how many stories inside of this thing, and fortunately it had been emptied, and he struck an I-beam rib on the bottom of it, and no one else was going to go down there. I had to go down there. And you think about that and some of that craziness, particularly when I was, really young and doing this work, you get a view of the world through a cracked lens, I think. And it's my lens, but it's cracked. It's different than everybody else's. It's unique in that sense because most people don't think about death, and death impacts everything that we do as medical legal death investigators.
But you're also like such a gregarious, outward, happy, fun, go lucky guy. And, in our heads, we start to think someone like this has to be a little more completely introverted, almost like cold towards stuff. But you maintain such a great level of humanity. I mean, was it always that way? Because that's just who you were? Or did you have times where it was maybe early on in your career where you're like, shit, this is just, I can't even deal with this.
Yeah. I had a lot of dark times, many dark times. And I'm the way I am now. I think that this person was probably buried in there, no pun intended, by all of the death that I witnessed. And listen, I'm no superstar. There are superstars out there that are still doing this job, even as we're chatting right now, Julian. There are people that are doing what I did. It never stops. Death never stops. It never pauses. And you have to deal with it in your own way. Most people there are exceptions. I think I was an exception. I stayed with it for 2 decades. But there are some people that can't go beyond about 7 years because, people, most of the time I found that, as in many areas of life, death investigation is greatly influenced by the entertainment media. They have this idea of what we do and who we are. And of course that's not the reality. We do everything, and I certainly did many things, as a death investigator, everything from responding to scenes and, doing my own investigation as an adjunct to whatever the police were doing. Then going back, working in the morgue, participating in over 7,000 autopsies over the course of my career. And then the other big thing that I think people believe that law enforcement does is notify families. And I made close to 2,000 in-person death notifications. So, and it's a skill set that you develop. And trust me, the last one was just as bad as the first one.
2,000?
It just never gets easier. Never gets easy. Sometimes you have to do it, which I absolutely despise. You have to do it over the phone. You try to reach out and find a local law enforcement agency to go to the home, say, make them call me or have them hang on the line. You stand there with them as I tell them over the phone. I have to guarantee that individual has been notified. And then, you begin to count up all the ones that you go and you visit homes and you make those notifications. And it's a skill set that you develop. It's not a muscle that you use a lot outside of that context. I've had to deal with high stress situations, obviously in my personal life. And I think that kind of equipped me for some of that because I knew that, it would come to an end. And, there's nothing you can do to assuage a family. No. After you've told them this, it's almost like you pull the pin on a grenade and throw it into a room and close the door behind you. A total stranger, mind you, that does this. And you've just wrecked their life. Certainly at that moment in time, because it comes out of the blue. They didn't expect this to happen. You don't know these people. You don't know them. I don't wish people ill will. It's not my intention to do that, but someone has to do it. And I found, obviously, through my own experience, that the best way to do it is not to hem and haw about it. You have to get right to it because people are always keyed up. They're keyed up anyway. You badge them. When you show up at the door, they know that no one generally shows up at their door with a badge and they're bringing great tidings. So you get right to it. And because there's nothing you can do to stem the gnashing of teeth and the rending of clothing and everything else that goes on that accompanies that task.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. Please hit that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.